Okay, the rare piece of big news, in quotes, coming out of OTAs. It is Wednesday, June 5th. Yesterday was the Patriots' last OTA practice of the spring. That will be open to the media. They're going to have a couple more this week. They'll roll that into the weekend and then roll that into mandatory minicamp where we will get real substantive stuff to talk about. Still with a lot of the same caveats, though. It's not padded. It's a lot of installation. And, this is, it used to be Trey Nixon season, practice squad, receiver, always start. Is he going to be a sleeper? He's going to put to make the roster. Oh, no, he's going to be on the practice squad or out for the year, unfortunately, a year ago. Right now, it's Tyquan Thornton's season. Just the point is, take everything with a grain of salt. But the piece of news that we got yesterday, in any headline across any website or any app that you're reading, was Drake Maye is now number 2. And normally this wouldn't be a big deal that the number 3 overall pick is something number 2, because you would expect him to either be preparing to start or competing to start. But the Patriots, for most of the spring, have said, no. Number 3 will be number 3. Drake, you'll go after Jacoby Brissett, after Bailey Zappi, in live team periods, meaning 11 on 11s and 7 on 7s. And if you've listened before, you know my take on that was, look, okay, I don't love it, but I want to know the total reps. I don't know the order in which they went. I want to know how many Jacoby had, how many Bailey Zappi had, and how many Drake Maye had, because they need Drake Maye to get good as fast as possible before the New England Patriots think about getting good again as a team. The only way that happens is to give him more reps. Well, in talking with Mike Giardi last week, we broke that down. Drake Maye had more reps than any quarterback in last week's OTA practice. And for the record, the media gets to see 3 out of 10. So these are small sample, glimpses, limited. Ton of noise in our evaluations ongoing as far as looking at this new team, the 2024 Patriots, but we push on. And so on Tuesday, not only did Drake Maye go second in these competitive 11 on 11 and 7 on 7 periods, which was mostly in the red zone. And that's such important context because, you'll hear people at the opposite end and the hardline stance of like, oh, it doesn't matter. You need to complete your passes. Look, red zone work favors the defense. That's it. Go at any team, at any level, any practice, any game. The best quarterbacks in the league last year, NFL, completed fewer than half of their passes inside the red zone. So when I tell you that Jacoby Brissett yesterday was 9 of 19 in team periods, that Drake Maye was 6 of 10 and Bailey Zappi was 4 of 8, not as bad as it seems. However, those are not the numbers that I care most about. And we'll get into the specifics of the 11 on 11s and break down Drake's day. The numbers that I cared most about, again, the total reps for the quarterbacks. Jacoby Brissett had 25. Then Drake Maye went second. He finished with 14. Bailey Zappi had 10. Joe Milton had 4 and should probably start to be thinking about different plans for this summer. But as far as Maye goes, because this is what everyone wants to know, how does the kid look? How quickly, how close is he to getting good so that the Patriots can take off? Something we really won't know until the middle of training camp, but it's June. We got to talk about something. What I would say is my observations in this one practice matter less than the quotes that we got from coaches who have been around him every single day and from Maye himself. Now, I say that understanding and freely admitting and acknowledging that the coaches are never going to air out their crap to the media, particularly about a 21-year-old quarterback they just drafted 3rd overall. Okay, they'll be honest to a point, but it's not in their best interest to say this play sucked, that's why. He broke down. This is inexcusable, like they might in a team meeting. Okay, it doesn't do anybody any good. But what Alex Van Pelt did say, as far as what's good and what needs to get better, and if you've been following Drake as a prospect, as you know I have for months, there was one area that everyone picked at that said, "Oh, this is terrible. This is bad. This is messy. You got to clean it up. You got to tighten it up." Well, that area, according to Alex Van Pelt, is getting tightened up, cleaned up. And what I'm talking about is footwork. Okay. And what I asked Alex Van Pelt was, what's an area he's surprised you in, right? It's only been 4 or 5 weeks. We're not projecting anything right now, but so far, looking back, what's an area that he's ahead of where you expected? Here was his quote. I'd say the ability to pick up the footwork changes. It's a big change for a guy to come in and completely change the footwork, but we did it right away and he's embraced it. Now, the reason he said changes is because the Patriots actually involve 4 or 5 different types of footwork. Clearest examples could be a 3-step drop, a 5-step drop, a 7-step drop. You'll have bootlegs going either direction, and there's a little bit more to it. But that's how you get to multiple different sets of footwork. And so the area that Alex Van Pelt said they're continuing to work on, that needs to be picked up a little bit for Drake Maye, is that it's just relaying the play calls. Like, this is a dude who would make plays, like a lot of college quarterbacks, look to the sideline, pick up some sort of visual signal, go into the huddle. Actually, not even going to the huddle. He would just relay it to his teammates along with any other checks or calls coming from the sideline with all these cards and hand motions and signals, and then just go play ball. Right now, he's got 13, 14, sometimes 15 word play calls to hear into his headset and then spit out and understand what every single player in the offense is doing, why, and how it all fits together. So if this upsets you, the Drake Maye is struggling relaying the play calls. First of all, I would say read about other rookie quarterbacks this year, last year, anytime in the past. This is a common issue. Second of all, if you didn't pick up a new language within 4 weeks during the pandemic on Duolingo, I definitely don't want to hear anything from you. Now, if this is an issue in August, that you can't just get into the huddle and say the play, know everything, and do it in a timely fashion, yeah, absolutely. It's a problem. It's June 5th. Now, Drake said the same thing when I asked him the same question after practice, because we got to speak to him, EVP, Drake Maye, a couple other offensive assistants. And I said, what's an area where you've exceeded your own expectations and one that you're a little further behind? In addition to fixing his footwork, the next area you would want for Drake Maye to walk down a path that says, I'm going to lead you where you want to go. I'm going to be a franchise quarterback, and I'm going to do it quicker than you expect. It would be his mastery of the playbook. And the area that he has exceeded his own expectations so far was exactly that. He said, I know the formations. I know the terminology. I'm comfortable with it. He even called himself a pretty smart kid. So he's fairly secure and confident, something we knew going into this Drake Maye experience anyway. But that checks off the two biggest boxes for Drake right now, as far as we can go here in May. OTA is coming up on minicamp. And yet, as encouraging as all those things were to hear, again, within the context of they're never going to air out all of their dirty laundry, when you get on the field for this one OTA practice, Drake Maye in 11 on 11s was 3 of 6 with a couple of picks. And his only completions were 2 checkdowns and then a running back screen. So I go to one more quote before we move on and dive into the whole notes of all of practice. And that was this. Alex Van Pelt, when asked, why isn't he getting more reps? Why isn't he going second? He said, look, we're going to take this slow. We're going to do it the right way. We're going to bring him along and develop him. And that's that. And so to me, despite what I saw, which was discouraging, and despite everything that I heard, which was very encouraging, that to me sounds like the right plan more than ever. It's not because I'm down on Drake Maye. It's not because Tuesday's OTA practice meant a ton, or that we should be buying into everything that was said around that quote. But the fact they're going to take him along slowly and make sure you work from the ground up, literally the ground up, the footwork and the understanding of where this play is going to go from the first word all the way to the 16th is the right approach. In the meantime, he is getting second reps. Why? Well, another quote for you. Alex Van Pelt, quote, we always talk about earning your reps around here. As he continues to grow and have successful practices and start stacking those, then we can think about moving him up the depth chart. Well, seems like they did a lot of thinking. And again, Tuesday's practice, not a good look for Drake Maye, but let's get into exactly why. Okay, so I told you for all the live periods, 11 on 11s, 7 on 7s, where the defense is trying, guys are going full speed. He had 14 reps to Jacoby Brissett's 25. Billy Zappi had 10. Joe Milton had 4. Here's what they did with those reps. Jacoby Brissett, per my charting, you'll see slightly different numbers in different places. That's because when guys get quote-unquote sacks, the defense, they run to the quarterback and then pull up. And sometimes they'll even pull up within an arm's reach when they're getting blocked. So it's just a little hazy. But by my charting, Jacoby Brissett was 9 of 19 with 4 sacks. Drake Maye was 6 of 10 with 2 picks and a sack. That includes the 7 on 7 numbers. Bailey Zappi was 4 of 8. Joe Milton was 1 of 4. When you isolate the 11 on 11, so you got a full offensive line, a full defense, guys are flying around, you got to step up in pockets, deal with pressure. Jacoby Brissett, again, in the red zone, tight spaces, timing is emphasized. This is June with a whole new offense. He was 3 of 10 with the 4 sacks. And you probably could have argued for one more, which, as someone pointed out to me as we're watching practice, just a lot of media sitting on the hill. This kind of looks like Jacoby in 2016 when he was a rookie. And that's a common thing for rookies to hold onto the ball, pat the ball. You're not going to get touched. There's no real harm here. You want to make the right throw. And so that's what they do. They just bounce in the pocket, hold the ball. It was too long. It's not great. Drake Maye, as I told you, 3 of 6, 2 interceptions and a sack. His sack was on an unprotected free blitzer coming straight up the middle. Christian Ellis, who's a special teamer. But again, you want to talk about guys who are absent. We'll get to those in a second. That's why Christian Ellis was in the middle of a starting defense for at least one rep opposite Drake Maye. And Billy Zappi was 2 of 4. You don't care about Billy Zappi all that much. Let's get to the picks. So Drake Maye, this was outside the red zone. His first interception was simply sailing one over Juju Smith-Schuster, who had come free over the middle on an in-cut at the intermediate level. And instead, Drake Maye's pass sails over his head and finds Caleb Ford-Dement, undrafted rookie corner. Probably not sticking around, but a good day for Caleb. I'm not worried about this pick at all. Shouldn't be concerned. Not just because it was June 4th, not because it's OTAs, because it's the time to screw up, and sometimes it passes sail. But when you look at Drake's passing chart in college, he was ahead of the pack, more so in the middle of the field at the intermediate and deep levels than any other area on the field in terms of accuracy. That's where he wins. That's how he wins. That's where he owns the field. So one errant throw against all of that history for a guy who has that great arm strength to begin with, but also when you break down the numbers, says, okay, he's especially good here. Not worried. It happens. The second interception, well, first of all, it was a great defensive play by Kyle Duggar, who watched his eyes, waiting for this check down. It finally came, and Drake Maye whips right. This is in the red zone now, in a different period, in a different play, obviously, and just whips right and chucks one at Antonio Gibson, which he later described as, it sounded like a choice route because they're trying to read man versus zone coverage. And I just saw it as hurried processing, a little bit too quick, right? You got that clock ticking in your head. He knew he'd held the ball on for a long time. So he just whips right, throws it. It's a little low, and Kyle Duggar makes this diving grab for an interception. Great job, Kyle Duggar. Even better job also by Pop Douglas, who watched this, saw Duggar get up, then dove and punched the ball out and recovered the fumble for what a play I have to imagine Troy Brown was just, having flashbacks there on the sideline. Again, no one is freaking out about interceptions as OTAs, but that type of hurry processing would have me a little bit more concerned as far as, okay, if I'm in the meeting afterward and we have to address these, okay, that's the first low light I'm throwing up there. Just play a little slower if you need to. Throw it away. You can't be chucking the ball just to get rid of danger. We're not playing hot potato. Okay, the ball's not lava. We need to get through your progressions, and if you get through them and there's nothing there, boom, out of bounds. Not much to say about Jacoby Brissett. Again, it was a hard day overall for the offense, and it wasn't just on the quarterbacks. And again, we'll have practices like these when they're in pads. We're getting closer to the season. They should be weighted a little bit more. And I'm going to tell you not to freak out. I want to see some trends. I want to see a bigger sample. But when we're diving into the details, this is what you get. For the receivers, not a banner day for them either. KJ Osborne had 2 drops. First one's a little tough. Back shoulder. He's going left to right across the back line of the end zone. Brissett tries to really rip one in there. But you get 2 hands on it. To me, even though you're going the opposite direction, counts as a drop. Juju had a drop, also had the most targets. Here are those target leaders. Juju Smith-Schuster caught 2 out of 5. Demario Douglas, 3 out of 4. KJ Osborne, 2 out of 4. JaMychal Hasty, backup running back, 3 out of 3. And tight end Hunter Henry had 2 out of 3. Also a nice slant touchdown against Kyle Duggar. So there's a lot of love for Pop Douglas in other places based on this one practice. To me, all 3 of his catches were in 7-on-7s. He's working over the middle of the field. I just temper expectations because, again, 11-on-11s is where you're really going to measure these guys, quarterbacks, receivers, certainly pass protection, obviously. And I would just wait. We know what Pop is. You need to see him work consistently. 3 catches, all in one period. Fine. He stood out mostly because of the players that we just mentioned. Juju had a drop. KJ Osborne had 2. Oh, and Jalen Polk and Tyquan Thornton combined for as many catches as you and I. So that's that. Again, worried? No, but you want to see more from a group that our guy Mike Jardy, stink, stunk, if you wanted to, could have taken a victory lap yesterday. As for the offensive line, here's where we were. Oh, the player absences. Let's get to those. Well, then start with the offensive line. Micah Onwenu, nowhere to be found. Chukwuma Okorafor, not there. Cole Strange, as we know, going to be out deep into the season. In addition, Matt Judon was gone. Jelani Tavai walked into practice in street clothes. He had an offseason operation procedure. I don't know exactly. Still digging on that. Josh Uche, Jonathan Jones, Devon Godchow, Marcus Jones, Sione Takitaki. So it's mostly defensive absences, but just not a practice, again, that's representative of the team that we're going to see week 1, 2, 3, 4, 15, 16, etc. Now, back to the offensive line. So without Onwenu and a core 4, and obviously close range, here was from left to right, your first offensive line. I'm not going to call them starters, but the first offensive line in front of the starting quarterback, Jacoby Brissett, who was anointed by Alex Van Pelt after Drake Maye said, we don't have any starters. There's no depth chart. Nah, okay. Fellas might want to get on the same page. Here it was. Calvin Anderson was a left tackle. Sidney Sow was a left guard. That's starting to become a trend. It looks like they want to keep him there at left guard. David Andrews was a center. Nick Leverett was at right guard, another trend. And third-round rookie, considered to be a contender to win the left tackle job, because he can convert to left tackle, was Caden Wallace, back at right tackle, where he played all of college at Penn State. The second offensive line, the one that was in front of Drake Maye when they first got into 11-on-11s, Tyrone Wheatley Jr. at left tackle, Michael Jordan at left guard, Antonio Mafi at center, Layden Robinson at right guard, and right tackle, Vidarian Lowe. Not exactly the Monstars here for the Patriots up front. Part of that is going to be the absences. Part of it is going to be moving players around. Mafi never played center in college. He didn't last year. This is brand new to him. They seem to want to make this work. Also because Jake Andrews, 4th-round pick from 2023, was among the absent. So you plug someone in, see how it goes. And for the Patriots, I would have rather see Caden Wallace at left tackle with that top group. Okay. Calvin Anderson played a little bit of right tackle last year. We all know how it went. But if he's going to make the conversion as a rookie after 4 years of starting at Penn State at one position, and now you're going to ask him to do something totally new in the NFL, I want him to get as many reps as possible at left tackle. They have a different philosophy. Maybe it was just one day, but it's something I'm going to be keeping an eye on. Elsewhere in offense, and we'll get to defense, running backs, JaMycal Hasty, I mentioned, perfect 3 of 3 on targets. Had a back shoulder touchdown grab versus Juwan Bentley in 7-on-7s. I thought it was the best catch of the day, right there, and just in front of the left pylon, or just behind the left pylon. It was a really good throw. Jacoby Brissett found him one-on-one against Bentley. Rondre Stevenson, though, of course, led off all of the periods among the running backs. He only caught 1 to 2 targets. This dude is going to fit so well in this outside zone scheme, which they mixed in some gap concepts, some man block runs yesterday. Not a ton to read into, again, because it's not padded. You're doing 7-on-7s for certain periods. It's not a lot of work for the running backs as rushers, but we'll continue to learn the more that we go on. Oh, and after him, it was Antonio Gibson and Kevin Harris. So JaMycal Hasty's really fighting for a 3rd, 4th spot as far as the running backs go. Defensively, look, again, red zone is going to favor them. A lot of patting the ball. So you assume some tight coverage. And it was Christian Gonzalez, who looks completely free and healthy and capable again outside of one spot. Alex Austin, rookie last year, drafted by the Bills in the 7th round, goes to Houston on their practice squad. The Pats just pluck him off of there, and he started games down the stretch. Great interception of Josh Allen, as we remember. He was starting opposite Gonzalez. And in the slot, curiously enough, so we should again know Jonathan Jones was out, as was Marcus Jones, was Isaiah Bolden, who we've not seen a whole lot of because he got concussed in a very, very scary situation against Green Bay in the preseason last summer and at the game, as you remember. He's 6'1", 6'2", very fast. And I think it's interesting to see him in the slot. It also, again, highlights the absences and the injuries the Patriots have had. But I'm curious if they're more willing to give that a shot because you see more bigger slots in the league. Juju Smith-Schuster is one example, or a lot of these tight ends that will get split out. We saw Mike Gesicki a year ago. Then you do the Wes Welker, Julian Edelman types, right? The slot is no longer just a home for the water bug, right? You can get some big fish in there. And then you would need a defender to be able to match that size. Is it Isaiah Bolden? I don't know. I still think that's the home for Marcus Jones when the time comes, but we'll see. Aside from that, Alex Austin had a PBU. Marte Mampu had a PBU, as did Mikey Victor, a backup corner. Christian Barmore, I had as player of the day. 2 sacks. Again, these are a little subjective, but just straight through the middle of the pocket. That dude cleaned up on one, looping around on a stunt. Another, he just got right through it. Look, the play would have been dead if they hadn't let it keep going. Another player who I wanted to mention, because again, a lot of guys are missing right now, but one group that's been consistently intact has been the safety group. And that goes for Kyle Duggar, who I mentioned had the interception. It goes for Jabril Peppers, is still bouncing around, and Marte Mapu. But behind them is Jaylinn Hawkins, who is a late signing in free agency. He was their fourth safety right now. He's wearing number 32 in practice in the exact same way that Devin McCourty did, which is just going to take me months of watching practice to not think it's still Devin, even though he's been gone since 2022. But Jaylinn Hawkins, of those four, certainly not the best player. He's not the second best player, probably not the third best player. But he does fit the profile of a traditional free safety more than those other guys. And so I don't believe, would pivot to Jaylinn Hawkins as this kind of free safety playing in the post, single high, got to cover sideline to sideline, cover one, sometimes cover three, depending on the version of the matches that you're using. But I think there's a role here for him. Now, he was targeted 3 straight times in 7-on-7s and gave up 2 catches and then had a pass breakup, or I'd say forced incompletion. It was unclear against Mitchell Wilcox, a tight end in the low red zone. But that's a player I think they're counting on for special teams. I think they're counting on for defense. And you'll keep 4 safeties. The Patriots did last year. We still need to see what Marte Mapu can do. We know who Kyle Duggar is. We know who Jabril Peppers is. But Jaylinn Hawkins, I'm just going to say, keep an eye on for now. And it might be me saying, keep an eye on Mac Wilson, which I was saying last summer in Zone Bertrand. And then it took until that Steelers game in December to be like, oh, hey, Mac Wilson, who's great down the stretch. But Jaylinn Hawkins, for me, is just a piece that I think can carve out a role. He's just going to need to see more time and opportunity. And at least for Tuesday, he did. Special teams, not much to report here. Chad Ryland went 4 or 5 on field goals, no attempts, as we saw for Joey Sly, the veteran who they brought in to give him some competition. In the returners, familiar faces, Pop Douglas, Jalen Reagor, Isaiah Bolden's back there. These are punt and kick returns. Marcus Jones, as you know, will get a good shot. You could argue probably the Patriots have one of the deeper return groups in the league. Not that I have all 31 other depth charts off the top of my head, but like Marcus Jones made All-Pro as a rookie in that role. Pop Douglas, if he's not fumbling, has a similar skill set. Isaiah Bolden, long speed. Jalen Reagor had a touchdown last year, one of 3 or 4, I think, in the entire league on kickoff. Anyway, we're going to learn a lot more about the kickoffs as we get into training camp. And you should honestly, again, I've said this before, come on down. It's going to be a wholly new experience from the vibes, the players, the coaches, a lot to learn and new and see. But if you want to see what the 2024 Patriots are going to look like, you can do that when these practices are open to the public before the first preseason game. Just come on down. And a lot of that will be, kickoffs and special teams practice. It'll be a lot more exciting than they've ever been, not just because of the guys I mentioned, but because of the new rule that's going to give them time and space to sometimes cut and go or have to pick up kicks that are intentionally kind of bounding over these players or they're angled. Like we saw a lot of different stuff yesterday as far as how the Patriots may or may not, we'll see, attack the kickoff in the different styles they want to use because it's a whole new ballgame on special teams. Okay, that'll do it for practice wrap. We have Gary Langley coming up as our MailFan, returning guest. And then we have my tales from Scandinavia, which I teased last time. We're just going to try out the segment, see how it goes. I would love to talk, as you know, some other things here on the podcast. It'll always be Patriot-centric, but I think for a trip that, was for my first anniversary, so my wife and I can scratch off 3 new countries we've never been to, have some time away together, 6-7 days. It just shot above every single expectation we had. And I was really, really grateful for that. And look, if you got the time or the means or a credit card like I do that comes through Marriott and give you bonus points, plus some points through work, you can make it happen too. So we'll get into that and have some fun. But in the meantime, mailbag and MailFan, Gary Langley. Are you ready to win this offseason? Like a long Drake Maye touchdown pass down the sideline, 7-on-7s, maybe OTAs, could be minicamp. Well, we're going to go from the field to the court to your phone because PrizePicks is stepping up its game as America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members ahead of the finals because the finals mean more on PrizePicks and so do the star players. All you need to do is pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your money. Again, with Prize Picks, you could turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite team, the Celtics or sports, baseball, maybe the Red Sox, this summer. You just make a Prize Picks lineup in as little as 60 seconds, need to make a pick or more on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. That's it. I've used it for the same reasons I just outlined. It's simple, it's easy, and if I'm watching the Sox at home, heck, I'll fire up Prize Picks, put a little money down, and get a lot more back. So download the app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100 on Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Okay, as promised, Gary Langley now joining us again for the MailFan segment. Again, if you want to be on the show, donate to Boston Children's Hospital as Gary has. He is joining us from the West Coast. He has a question that I did not get to a month ago. So you can even come on this show sometimes because I forgot about you. And in this case, Gary, I did not forget about you. Thank you again for coming on. Your question was about the 2023 draft class. So I'm going to read you your question. You're going to answer it, and then I'll dive in after that. You wanted to know which draft pick from last year I believe will not be on the team come week 1 of the season. So to refresh folks' memory, and you were kind enough to list all of the draft picks for me in the tweet as if I had forgotten. Did you think I had forgotten who they drafted 14 months ago?
It was for my actual own intelligence or lack of. I just needed to remember who I thought or didn't think was going to answer my own question.
Okay, very good. So Christian Gonzalez off the board, Keon White off the board, Marte Mapu off the board. They're all going to stick around. Here are the day 3 picks. Jake Andrews, center guard out of Troy. Chad Ryland, the kicker we know. Sidney Sal, your right guard last year, probably your left guard this year. Antonio Mafi, interior lineman. Keishon Boutte, we know. Bryce Behringer, the punter. Pop Douglas, he's off the board. And Isaiah Bolden, then a 7th round rookie out of Jackson State. So your answer to this question would be what?
If I had answered this a month ago, I would have said either Antonio Mafi or Jake Andrews, one of them playing for a spot and the other not making the team. Now with Cole Stranger's injury, I am expecting him to have a 0% chance of being available and active week 1. At best, you're talking pup. I still have a suspicion that this is a more severe injury than is being let on, and am not counting on him at all this year. So I think Jake Andrews and Antonio Mafi both have a darn good shot of making the roster and being active for week 1. So my answer would now change to Chad Ryland, who I still do not think will make the roster, and Isaiah Bolden not making the roster. I think those two would be the ones that are on the outside looking in.
Interesting. So I just wrapped a recap of everything I saw at OTAs yesterday. And one of the notes in there, which again, it's early June, volunteer practice, all that stuff, was Isaiah Bolden playing in the slot, which is a little unusual for a 6'1", 6'2" corner, but a guy who otherwise I think was going to at least be on the dead of the bubble before he got hurt last year because of his traits. You can develop him. They needed corners. You're signing Alex Austin right later in the season, and then he's starting towards the end of the year. I agree with you in the sense that I think Ryland is certainly at risk. You understand that from positional battle. I disagree in that I think Jake Andrews could be on the way out because I made a point a couple of weeks ago about the transition in Elliott Wolf and that the draft picks that were made by let's call it the Belichick Grow regime, it's really just the Belichick regime, are not as safe with a new guy at the top, right? He wants his own players, wants them to come in here. Jake Andrews was someone who was, by the consensus board, overdrafted, a little bit lighter, a little bit smaller, but came in with the Cole Popovich stamp of approval, meaning this guy who used to be the Patriots, mind you, it is a stamp. It is not a prick. It is not a shot. It is not a vaccine. It is just a stamp. Cole Popovich stamp of approval because he used to be on the Patriots staff. That mattered a lot to an organization that increasingly had a smaller inner circle. So my picks for this are Jake Andrews and Keishon Boutte, who people don't want to hear about. But this is a very young draft class, and another one I don't think the Patriots are going to be as attached to. What would you feel one way or another if it was Andrews or Boutte?
Andrews, I still think is a good pick. Given that Antonio Mafi, I think I read from maybe yourself or Doug, was taking reps at center. I think Jake Andrews' best chance is being the backup center and potential replacement for David Andrews down the line. And if people are already taking backup center opportunities away from him, that's not a good sign for Jake Andrews. So I think that's a good possibility. Keishon Boutte, I would like to know if he's actually available and maybe not on a commission or exempt list. I mean, who is his PR firm? Is it the Wolf from Pulp Fiction? Because he got arrested for a misdemeanor for gambling. What was it, in January? And we haven't heard a peep since. So excellent job by his team in covering up that story. If he's available, I also think that there's a good chance that Bourne starts the season on the PUP list. I have not been too encouraged by how the reports are coming out of how he is looking. And I see KJ Osborne or Juju Smith-Schuster being on the outside looking in. And I think the Osborne one is a little surprising, but I don't think even with $1 million, $2 million guaranteed that he is a 100% lock to make the roster. And Juju, we've all talked about getting out the door. So if they want to play the young guys, I know Kayshon Boutte wasn't one of their picks, but I actually think that if he is available and not suspended, that he has a better chance to make the roster than you're giving him the opportunity for.
Yeah, it a lot hinges on those veterans, right? You know, Osborne, I think, is going to make the roster. Tyler Hughes, either new receivers coach, for people who understandably would not know who Tyler Hughes is, was talking about how he's picking things up. He's a veteran. He's versatile in the room. You know, he's someone they envision as a starter. Juju, obviously, is a trade candidate depending on his summer performance. But even if he plays well, you might feel like you're selling high and want him out anyway. But besides that, Pop Douglas is not going anywhere. Kendrick Bourne, yeah, maybe starts on PUP. He expects to be ready for week 1. We'll see. 2 rookies, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, are going to be here. And then you get into the Tyquan Thorntons, the Kayshon Boutte's, anyone else you want in here. So I see Boutte as someone who also doesn't provide a ton of special teams value. At least right now, they're trying Tyquan Thornton on kick coverage and kick return. I don't expect it to go well from a 6'3" human being weighing 189 pounds, soaking wet. But again, we'll all find out. That's kind of the theme of the spring. All right, we have 2 more questions here for you, which I've not shared with you, but this is the bonus of sometimes being the mail fan in the middle or late part of the offseason. Are you ready for these 2 questions?
As ready as I'll ever be. Let's do it.
Okay. Number 1, Lawrence is asking, of the perceived weaknesses on the 24, he puts /25. Let's just stick to 24. On the 24 Patriots, players, position, or coaching staff, who is the best chance to be considered a strength at the season's end? So he wants like a sleeper, basically, a coach or a player you think is being underrated.
This is going to be kind of cheating because I brought this person up in our last fan mail segment.
The media, the beat is underrated. Underrated. Yes, here we go.
I'm a big fan of Alex Austin's game. Undrafted from last year. I think he is an outside corner that is going to be given starting opportunities, and that really does depend if Jonathan Jones sticks in the slot or potentially moves to a free safety type role. But I think Alex Austin is almost being forgotten about entirely, and he played a lot down the stretch for this team. And I think depending on what you do with Jonathan Jones and where he plays, Alex Austin is going to get a ton of reps in that outside corner position. And I know that's an area of concern for this team going into the season. And I think he's going to be a person that surprises.
I like it. He had a good practice yesterday, which feels like 2 days ago. I don't know why, but it was. He's had a good spring, and I think we still all want to see more. He made the big highlight play against Buffalo last year with the interception. I think it's worth monitoring because Jonathan Jones honestly might be best served as your utility man moving forward. 32 years old, can play in the slot outside if you like, maybe free safety in a pinch. But they'll see, because I think if Alex Austin does emerge, that would then free up Jonathan Jones. If he doesn't, then I feel like you probably feel compelled to put the veteran starter out there. I'm going to go with running back because I think this includes a guy like Taylor Embry, who's new to the staff, cast off by the Jets, who didn't want him anymore. He also presided over Breece Hall's breakout. That counts to me, maybe not to the Jets, who I don't think anyone is using as this big example of just sparkling decision-making. Now, again, I don't think Taylor Embry is some Hall of Fame coach, but Stevenson is on contract year. We know he's the best player on this offense, arguably. Maybe Mike Onwenu has something to say about that. And Antonio Gibson, I think, is just being a little underrated by folks who know him as the guy who fumbled his way out of Washington. And that's the biggest problem a running back can have. Aside from showing up late or sleeping in on Sundays, Gary, you can't fumble. I think we're all aware and understanding of this. But he's a guy who I think envisions and knows he could be a number 1 and says, I'm here to be a number 2. But between his pass catching, his ability to run between the tackles, as a power back, the dude's 230. I like him as kind of being underrated right now. And if they can run the ball enough, meaning the game situation allows them just to hand it off, I think everyone goes, Stevenson and Gibson is one of the better, maybe not the best, but 1-2 punches in the league at running back.
Yeah, for sure. And if Jacoby Brissett is going to play more than half of the season, they're certainly going to get a lot of opportunities, those two, because the game plan is going to be run first to set up the pass. And they're certainly more explosive at that position than they were last year. And Antonio Gibson fits into an offense that I think is going to suit his strengths. And obviously, he's going to give them a little bit more passing firepower out of the backfield. And I think that's a great pick. I think those two, especially with Ramondre getting a little closer to that contract conversation, is going to leave it all on the field.
I just feel like Antonio Gibson's that friend, in college, right? Who's like excellent as a freshman right away. He's your top friend. We'll go out anytime. It's going to be a great night. And then like the middle couple years, maybe he gets a little too drunk or just misses some classes. The grades dip and he's kind of like, oh, I got to transfer. And then whatever happens at that second school, you come back because he's going to see you on, break senior year. He's awesome again. Like, I think we're going to get refreshed, transferred, matured Antonio Gibson here for the Patriots backfield. This question comes from Dan. This is really me asking you because you have not been at OTAs. You've been across the country, Gary. I'm just going to ask if you share his concern, because baked into this question is, I would say, depression is strong. It's June. It's beautiful out. But Dan is asking, is the offensive line really as bad as they showed in OTAs? Is there any hope, any type of hope we can try and hold on to with that position group? So are you as worried as Dan sounds?
I think the conversation starts and ends with that position group. And we're only going to be as good as they are average. I think so long as they can provide average line play, then this team can do much better than Vegas is expecting them to, because I think the expectation is they will not be average. And they can be short at one position, tackle probably being the one biggest concern. But if you have 4 out of 5 players, you can kind of shift protection to offset the weakness that you do have. The problem is getting 4 good enough players along that offensive line.
I think that's totally fair. To Dan, I would just say, hold on, August. I remember writing last year after the preseason opener saying, okay, Bill O'Brien just called that game like he knows his offensive line is hot trash. And that's the problem, because Bill O'Brien knows a lot better than I do, even going to every single practice. And the thing is, you don't know until you have the pads on. 2.5 months from now, we'll also know a little bit more about Chuck Okorafor and Caden Wallace, if he can play left tackle, because that's where most of the concern is. I actually have a decent amount of belief in that Sidy Sal's play last year towards the end of the season, and the fact he played left guard for most of college means he could be at least a replacement level starter at left guard, which, if we're being honest, is what Cole Strange has been most of his career. David Andrews at center, right guard, certainly a question. Mike Onwenu is going to be great at right tackle. You don't love having question marks at 2 spots. Ideally, you'd have 1 and then try to figure it out. They don't. But I would just say patience is my only thing. It's a new system, new coaches. The patience might not pay off, but there's nothing from OTAs that I can tell you right now, this is a disaster or it's totally going to work out. You need, especially with the offensive line, to see them put pads on first, and then we'll all get to watch the preseason all at the same time. All right. I sprung those 2 questions on you. You told me you had an idea, I think, a pitch for an episode, and I said, don't tell me. Do it on the air. So what do you got?
All right. So this would be like a Patriots scrimmage mock draft, where you and potentially another guest on the show, Doug Kide, Mike Giardi, line up a draft with the expectation that this scrimmage between the 2 sides, 11 offensive players, 11 defensive players, would take place in replacement of the first preseason game. So you go through and you draft 22 guys, 11 on offense, 11 on defense, forget special teams for now. And the plan would be that those 22 players are your roster, and they are going up against the 22 players of the other person. You decide how you'd like to do it, if it's a snake draft or alternating. You decide if everybody's healthy, if you're kind of playing as they are today. But a fun exercise, I think, after OTAs, before training camp, we're in the kind of dead of summer, to see who can put the best 22 Patriots versus the other 22 Patriots.
Okay, I want to let everyone else know, this is not me speaking to you, this is speaking to everyone who's listening right now, that I did not pay Gary to say this. I did not raise that idea to him at all. I had no idea what he was going to say. He might have said something we had to cut entirely out of the episode, but I trusted wouldn't have been profane or vulgar. He did not. What he did say, however, though, is an idea that I have been running with on podcasts, to some listeners' dismay, since 17 when I was covering Penn State, good pal Sean Fitz, now at On 3. I have done, you'll be happy to know, the last 2 years taking this idea, which I love, by the way, if you couldn't tell. So thank you for your idea. We've been doing it. Inter-squad scrimmage draft with Fitzy the last 2 years. Because let's be honest, when you get down to round like 19 of this draft, which we've done, it's been a lot of fun. I love doing it, and I persist because I have a podcast, and you can just skip the episode. It's one of our least listened to every single year. But we need Fitzy in round 19 to spice things up a bit because there's only so many things you can say about Nick Leverett being a good value in round 19, where I just need Fitzy to go off for 5 minutes. And I'm hoping to have him back, which is a long way of saying we're going to do this for a third annual time on the third year of this podcast. And I'm glad you brought that up because seemingly no one else likes this idea, with the exception of a couple people who just get angry on Twitter. But it's my podcast. I like it. You do too. So we'll at least have one, if you could offer a reply, feedback to the third annual pass interference inter-squad scrimmage draft.
Well, I have egg on my face. I thought I had something original for you. I guess not. And I'm embarrassed, I guess, to say that I've already done one with a friend of mine, and it's already created a bunch of banter back and forth. And I'm very excited for you and Fitzy to maybe bring this one home, and we can ultimately decide who's got the best one. Maybe we have to play it on Madden. I don't know how we would actually have to settle the score other than just bantering back and forth. But I'm very excited to hear that you're going to have that third annual scrimmage.
Yeah, I think Madden might shut itself down if you tried to do that. With the worst probably rated team in the league saying just go outside. The screen will go black. You'll have all black, all white letters across saying go outside, Gary, please. And honestly, look, there's all a time and a place for Madden, especially in the offseason. We all miss football. But yeah, hopefully next week, maybe the week after, I will get Fitzy and we will do that on before training camp. But yeah, thank you for your idea. Feel free to send those rosters and reply to this episode, which will be posted later this week. Thank you for coming on again. Thank you for donating to Boston Children. And thanks for humoring me through this extended MailFan segment.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And I appreciate all you're doing with Boston Children. This is awesome, awesome stuff.
You got it, man. Okay, so we still have 3 months left until football, right? Right. So we still have to wait 3 months to go to a big game, right? Wrong. You can go to the NBA Finals with GameTime, my favorite ticket app, because GameTime is making NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier to get. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, and you can find killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guaranteed to watch the Celtics in the finals with GameTime. I scroll through GameTime all the time, not even for big games like the finals. I'm going to go to the Red Sox, take the tee in, boom, have a beer outside, wait at 7:01 for a 7:05 first pitch. I'm in. I've got one of the best seats at the house, sometimes up to 60% off. And you can do this, customizing your spot, customizing your section, viewing your view from the seat in your section. And it could be last minute ticket deals, flash deals, zone deals, whatever you want. But in the meantime, get on down to Causeway, game 1, game 2, game 5, hopefully not a game 7, to watch the Celtics in the NBA Finals, where you can take the guesswork out of buying those finals tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, all you have to do is create a free account on the GameTime app and redeem code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download GameTime today for last-minute tickets and the lowest price guaranteed. All right, we're going to try something new here, wrapping up Storytime from Scandinavia. And I thought about this when I took my wife to Valencia, Spain in mid-February. Her favorite country, I should say, in the world. Place would be Granada. Studied abroad there, lived abroad there. And so we went just kind of the end of what had been, as you all know, the longest season, a very hectic offseason. Belichick, Mayo, new staff, top 3 pick, yada, yada, yada. Said, we need a break. So we left, came back. I was like, I don't really have too much to offer. Loved the trip. It felt like going to a soccer match where I came back rooting as a Valencia fan. It was like going to church. It's awesome. Tons of songs. Just the passion. It was also one of the oldest stadiums in Spain. So as someone who grew up loving Fenway Park, still my favorite place on earth, it was nice to have that kind of connection to an older team, an older stadium, and just to soak it all in. But we didn't do the segment. And so when she and I go to Scandinavia, celebrating our first anniversary trip, which is really just, hey, let's skip the gifts. Let's go somewhere cool. And if we've never been there before, that's a bonus. But at least let's get away around Memorial Day weekend when we got married last year, which something I also admitted. I'll never forget sharing that. It was like pre or post wedding. Obviously, happiest time of my life, and tweeting about it. And someone said, it's really kind of a dick move to have your wedding on a holiday weekend. And you feel so good. It does not matter when anyone tweets at you at that point. But I really wanted to say to the guy, the hot dogs are going to taste the same on the 4th of July, right? Like, come on. Idea is no one has to take the day off on a Saturday because it's a Saturday. Come to the wedding on a Sunday, drive home, fly home Monday. That's it. Anyway, so we have, for now, committed ourselves to taking trips. We go to Scandinavia. My wife has been to 27, 28 different countries. And so she had never been to Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. I'll say this off the top. I would recommend anyone who enjoys traveling to make a point to go to Scandinavia in or around the time that we did, because it was one of the best trips I've ever taken. And I say this as someone who, has had every other direct family member, mom, dad, and sister, go to Sweden, where my sister studied abroad in high school and has, developed friends and a host family over there. They've left me at home. But aside from their interactions and their experience and their pictures, had no idea what I was getting into over there. And on top of the folks who are not hired to be nice to you, when you walk in the hotel, you go to a restaurant somewhere in a touristy area, very welcoming, communal place, quiet place. We heard maybe 2 or 3 car honks on our entire trip through Copenhagen, Bergen, Norway, and then Stockholm. And that's it. Very different style of living versus we come home and there are 5 right outside of our apartment here in Boston. Anyway, point was to use up all the hotel points I had left over. Take minimal time off of work, really 3 or 4 days in and around the holiday. So we left midweek, watched the end of game 1 of the finals from Logan, a couple of beers down. Jaylen Brown hits the 3, 2 hands up on the plane. Layover in Reykjavik in Iceland. First thing we saw was a hot dog stand. Turns out hot dogs and hamburgers, big. I'll throw pizza in there too. In Norway. And that's not just for me walking around for 60, 72 hours like I know everything. It's from a tour guide that we took. 2.5-hour bus ride to and from a different town in Norway, further inland, because Bergen is right on the western coast. And the tour guy was a German national who had been there for 20 years and says, look, you can go every single day in Norway just eating burgers and pizza. He said, I love it here. So see the hot dog stand, pass, wait out, connection to Copenhagen. We arrived. This was Tuesday going into a Wednesday, or actually Wednesday into a Thursday. Get in, of course, exhausted. It's 4:00 there. We take this cab ride. Second thing you learn about Scandinavia, do not take cab rides anywhere. It's not because they're unsafe or they smell or anything like that. They're just expensive as hell. You can bike anywhere you want to go. The trains are the cleanest, the most efficient, the fastest that I've ever experienced. Wife may have fallen in love with the metro in Copenhagen specifically. But anyway, we take this metro from what is southeast of the city. And Copenhagen, I would say centrally. Fuad, regular listener to this podcast, please blast me in the replies if any of this, as a resident, is incorrect. But we're taking this drive up from southeast part of the city, and the very central part, I would say that there is a river or an inlet that splits the city basically 80-20, right? And 20 is on the right side, and you're more or less on a small peninsula. But as we're driving finally up to the center of the city and we're going along this river, the cab driver, who's been very informative, asking and answering certain questions, very, very nice guy, points across the river to the right and says, cocaine. You can find cocaine over there. I'm going, what? And what, first of all, ever gave me the impression that was anything we were at all interested in? I had last pointed out Tivoli Gardens, which is the small amusement park, to the left where we had been before. He just looks right and says, cocaine. You can get cocaine. You can get anything you want over there. Just points to the right part of town. We'll come back to that. Not the cocaine, but the part of town. Finally get to the hotel. It's a little bit north of the city. Come on down. Henry McKenna, shout out, friend of the podcast, working for Fox Sports. His brother-in-law lives there now in Copenhagen. Said, oh, you got to go to Pluto. So we go to this restaurant, 6:30 reservation. Again, still like dead tired from all the traveling. Turns out it has a Michelin star. That was cool. First time I'd ever been there. And so I will say, though, that, you get in, menus are coming in. Nothing overwhelming, like a little bit of everything you could have wanted on there. And my wife usually likes rosé in the summer. So she goes with the white wine. And somehow in like the 15 minutes I had to look over the menu, decide everything that I wanted, kind of panicked when it came to what do I want to drink for the first time now here in Denmark. So I also went with white wine. And I mention this because, again, we're in a Michelin star restaurant. I had a pretty good sense that even as someone who is always cordial, tips exceptionally well, this is before we got to the check, but knows what it's like to be in the service business. Very patient, understanding all that. Had a real good feeling this waiter did not like us. And so my best theory in retrospect is that I had ordered the white wine, again, panicking at this point. And what I wanted for dinner was, some sort of sirloin cut that also, so liver was in there somewhere. There was this crunch, there was this bread. I don't know what happened, but it was delicious. And it probably didn't pair exactly with the white wine I had ordered. I don't know. Not an expert. Don't drink a ton of white wine. But anyway, Pluto was fantastic. We took a small walk to a cocktail bar and had one or two there, walked back home, call it a day. So Friday was packed, went to Tivoli Gardens. Again, it's an amusement park where if you had to babysit two kids you had never met before, this is a home run. Like, it's not too big. You could get lost. You'll find the kids eventually. They've got rides. Again, if you would just imagine like all of Boston Common, first of all, doubles in size, but it's just an amusement park in the middle, arcades, rides, actual gardens in there, different smaller restaurants. We go there for a couple of hours. It's at the top of every list of where you got to go in Copenhagen. Had a really nice time. Set the record on the whack-a-mole. Not a big deal. Second on the boxing in the arcade. But anyway, we walk around. Starts to rain. We go down this long stretch. I believe I know I'm going to screw up this pronunciation. It's called Stroget, I believe, which is their long, basically Newbury Street, right? This is the street you need to see. A lot of shops, a lot of people going around, touristy spots. Just getting a whole feel for the downtown because we were staying a little north or the northern part of the city. And, late afternoon, fatigue starting to catch up again, just all the walking you hadn't been used to, which was great, again, just to walk out and about. So we stopped to a war museum, and this is getting closer to the eastern part of the city. I was expecting a ton of Viking stuff. No. This just starts in 1500, and you learn that Denmark - Norway as one kingdom for centuries just fought back and forth with Sweden. And so after all of the fighting, they just kind of all hang out and go their separate ways, one never fully conquering the other, but you just go along this huge wall in this two-story museum, which otherwise was excellent. But I had no idea about any of the Baltic Wars or Scandinavian Wars and all these different things, but really cool background. So anyway, mentioned we're tired, a little bit rainy. We're getting close to this eastern part of the city where, again, the cab driver had just pointed and gone, if you want cocaine, it's over there. Come again? So I said, okay, I looked into this, now telling my wife. And what he really meant was that there's this part of the city called Free Christiania. And in the early 1970s, there had been a part of the city that had been abandoned by the military. It used to be a base. I'm not sure if it was a Navy base or what. And being the 70s, a group of, we'll just shorthand this, call them hippies, squatted in that area. And they squatted long enough that it came to the attention of the city government or perhaps the national government. I don't remember which one, that they said, okay, look, we'll just let them stay. It's a very left-leaning government at the time. You guys can hang out. We'll call it a social experiment. Well, from the early 70s all the way until today, Free Christiania is still there. And so I said, let's go across the river. There were a couple other details, one of which, according to one travel blog, I'd read too many sites at this point. I'm trying to tell my wife, hey, we should go over there. Let's see what it's about. Was that it might be run by organized crime. And there's this pusher street you don't want to go close to where there's, some drug dealing or you can pick up weed or all these different things. She goes, you want to go visit on our first day in Denmark, first full day in Denmark, to this place run by organized crime? I'm like, yeah, of course. Why not? Anyway, not a fair description. It's very much more in the communal. There's no violence. There are also a couple other rules that you need to be keenly aware of before you go over there. Because what it is, again, in this part of town, which is really insulated from what is really the rest of the city. You can go across the river and you're still in, you're in the neighborhood of Christiania, but it's not Freetown Christiania, which is run by its own rules. A couple thousand people live there, and there's a waiting list if you ever want to join. Apparently, Lenny Kravitz really wanted to join one time, and they said, oh, that's great. Rock and roll legend, Lenny Kravitz. You can wait. You're at the bottom of the wait list, just like everybody else. But the rules, when you get into this town, which because there's a lot of graffiti on the outside, and there are some kind of, I don't want to say like story and a half walls, but like it when you see it, because everything else around it is fairly normal, just kind of city life and buildings. First of all, there's a tall wooden gateway, and it says, Free Christiania in there. The rules are no running, because running means the cops are coming. Second rule is you cannot take a picture of anyone without their permission. And so as we walk over the bridge, first of all, I've not realized that the part of town that still looks like the rest of Copenhagen is not part of this Freetown Christiania, which if I had seen any other pictures, which are hard to come by, as you now know, I didn't realize that you would know it when you see it. It was so distinctly different from everything else in the map. I just thought you go over the river, that's the part of town. So we're like seeing buses and subways and tons of people crossing the street and 7-Elevens and like probably a Gap somewhere. And I'm like, okay, don't take any pictures. We weren't there, man. Keep walking, get further into this part of town, finally see it. And, walk around for 5-10 minutes. It felt like a little abandoned. There were some shops and restaurants, and it was, again, a peace, love, nonviolent kind of area. People live there. They thrive. There's some organization. We didn't spend a ton of time. But as we were leaving, close to getting out a different exit point, this girl asked, hey, could you take my picture to show that I've been here? And me being on edge, the idiot at that point, that late in the travel day, I was like, oh, no, we can't do that. She goes, no, you're just taking it of me, not of someone else. I go, nope. And there was one other person standing by, so I'm a little wary of the kind of distraction, pickpocket play, which you'll find a lot of major cities. It's not, specific to Copenhagen. But I said, nope, we can't do it. And just there was ever like an audible eye roll. She gave that to us. So I'm sure we probably could have taken the picture. But anyway, take the metro back. Another lovely dinner in town. And we flew out the next day to go to Bergen after taking a lovely canal tour. Really, really like Copenhagen. My wife will go back in a second. No knowledge of Bergen. We go to Bergen, which is in the southwestern part of Norway, as opposed to Oslo, which is in the southeastern part, because it's facing the ocean. And it's known as the gateway to the fjords, which are found all across the world, New Zealand, Norway, parts of Alaska. But they are remnants of glaciers that basically created these cracks in coastlines that have since obviously been filled with ocean water after the glaciers melted. But they're long, they're narrow, and they're very, very deep. And there's a shorthand for how deep these fjords are, because you look up at the surrounding mountains, however tall those mountains are, that's how deep the fjord is. And so our goal was, okay, we get into Bergen. It's Friday night, Saturday night. Next day, you take a 2.5-hour bus ride, bunch of strangers. There's actually a girl from Marblehead, Mass, who's on a bus with her friend. Great to know them. Also, the ideal friends to make quickly over a long trip like this, which was about 12-14 hours, including, again, 2.5 hours in a bus to this town that was at the base of one of these fjords and back, because then you have your friends who you can say, hey, do you mind taking our picture? Sure. Would you take ours? Anyway, so we get to Bergen late at night, crash to the hotel. Again, shout out. This is where my Marriott points right out, but it was great just to be there, walk in, bus takes us from 8 a.m. all the way out to this town eventually called Flom. And it's just amazing. Like I have never seen a more beautiful, spectacular part of the world than where we drove in Norway and then got to this town, took a ferry, one-way ferry through the fjords. Again, these deep inlets with these tall mountains covered in forests, and there are waterfalls poking out. You can hear them in the distance, and there are probably a couple hundred people on this ferry, which is like a standard ferry you would find, anywhere in the U.S. And it's got a couple levels to it, and it's, I don't want to say luxury ferry. There's a bar inside, because there's a bar everywhere when you're on vacation, but it was mostly silent, because the best way I could describe it, and I would just say, look at the pictures that I posted on Twitter when I came back, is like you're going through this area you would only see in Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, more specifically. Just breathtaking in the best type of way. And so you're on this ferry, a couple of people are chatting, but everyone is just gawking the whole ride. And you hear the motor, and it's just deep crystal blue water and towering mountains. And you can see snow in the distance on some of them. And that's what's coming all the way down through the waterfalls. And so we end up in another small town, quick lunch break. At this point, it's the middle of the day. Take a bus all the way up to the top of one of these mountains, and there's this overlook where you see the fjord out in front of you. And some of these stretch for 25, 30 miles, or even longer. Like it's not a lake, it's not a pond. A lot of them have twists and turns, but it was just some views you never forget. This was one for me. So highly recommend. Take the bus all the way back. I'm listening to podcasts, catching up on the Eastern Conference Finals, the Western Conference Finals, and we get dinner, walk back to the hotel, crash again. Next day. Okay, so this was Sunday. Spent the whole day in Bergen, and Bergen is the second largest city in Norway. Only about 230,000 people. And I say that because it wasn't like a small city, but basically you walk downtown, they've got these two long, what feel like docks, but they're basically peninsulas. And the rest of the city is kind of up on the mountainside, the hillside, similar to what I just described. Again, tons of forest, but the houses are built into it. And so we took a funicular, this very steep, single track train. It goes up and down. That's all it does all day, taking tourists to a lookout over the city. I tweeted this picture as well. And I have no reason in my life to ever go to Bergen or want to go to Bergen. I think of Bergen, I think of New Jersey, a place I want to avoid. From now on in my life, I will go there whenever it's even remotely possible within the context of another trip, or we just have some time. And it's not easy to get there. Norway is a famously expensive country, which I found out the hard way. I'm talking about, I don't know, a burger for $22, which is also kind of like Brookline, but here we are. So it was spectacular. And we come back down, go back into downtown, which you can see a lot of obvious tourist traps. There's a Starbucks here. There's McDonald's there. There's an Irish bar, which is the Scruffy Murphy's, I think it was called. Walk into an ice bar. First time ever doing that. That was a blast. And the only thing I wanted to do in this full day in Bergen was to stop at the, we mispronounced it. It was football football bar. Because they had a team in town, SK Braun, that had a match. It was kind of close to our hotel. Couldn't find a way to get tickets. Stadium's only got 17,500 folks. And just couldn't do it. So I said, all right, we'll do the next best thing and watch at a pub. And the bartender at our hotel, really, I don't know, like we got dinner and he brought us food, even though he's serving everybody else drinks. Said like those actually are pretty good spots to go downtown. The Scruffy Murphy's bar, there's another place. Didn't work out. So we go to the football pub. It's a little bit further in town. Walk in. It's just all middle-aged dudes enjoying their soccer on a Sunday. And this is what I want. Just a pub and a beer, and to hang out on these old worn wooden tables. We go inside because the outdoor patio is packed. And it was a lot of fun. Home team scored in the first half. They're up 1-0. They give up 3 in the second. But the team they were playing in Norway was the second best, I think, in the league last year. And so that team is in a city above the Arctic Circle. Again, everything in Scandinavia is a little bit further north than pretty much anywhere else in the U.S. And so they lose amid a lot of action back and forth. But anyway, right before we leave, I leave my wife at the table, go to the bathroom, take the tab. We're about to leave, go back. One of these dudes who's like probably in his 50s, in a Caprice, hunched over, 2 fists down on the table, like he's a gorilla, like ready to stand off. But instead is hitting on my wife. They come over. Before I can get a word out, oh, you must be her father. Like immediately body. Now, this dude, it took a second to realize, okay, he's had a few. And, within a minute is doing stuff like you would think it's if he instead been 18, like, oh, you lift it all. And like, look, I have not seriously lifted in a long time than what I used to. Still got a decent chest. It's like, I'm just you bench. Proud member of the 2 plate club. Anyway, so he's going back and forth at how much he lifts and all these different things. And I'm like, I just want to get out of here. So he's like, is that all you do? And this is all within 2 minutes. This is not a prolonged conversation, anything that I'm happy to share. But I said, you know what? Okay, we'll end this conversation quickly. I'll tell him I box. She'll go, yeah, I box too, 4 times a week. She goes quiet. I'm like, okay, this is good. He leans back down on the table. Instead of the 2 fists down, he puts 1 elbow down and holds out his fists. Like we're standing at a pre-match press conference where we're going to get a little too close nose to nose, but he doesn't go nose to nose because my wife is now in the middle of us not knowing what the bleep is going on and just holds out his fist like we would hold opposite. So I give him a quick fist bump. He goes, I'm going to teach you how to box when we get back. I go, okay, this is time to go. So I closed out the tab. We leave. And that was Bergen. Loved it. We go to Stockholm. This will be much quicker because we had, a long flight delay before we could get out of town. Stockholm was wonderful. Gamlestan is a small island in the middle of the city, which are really comprised of, a few bigger islands all connected, obviously, with bridges and the larger archipelago of the city. It felt like the most modern, or I don't want to say regular, but like a European city. If you've been, parts of Madrid might feel like parts of Rome. This is what more Stockholm was like. So we hit rooftop bar or 2 to see the whole skyline of the city. That was phenomenal. Gamlestan, the city, the island I mentioned, the very center, goes back to the 1200s. That's an old town. So as a dude who lived in the North End, loves old stuff. Great to visit there and see different sites. So we walked. Also went to, I'll say this, we'll go to Stockholm. You have to go to the Vasa, VASA museum because they have a fully preserved ship from, I believe it was 1628, that the then king of Sweden, there's still a king of Sweden. Another thing that kind of surprised visiting all the countries is they still have, even Norway, founded in 1905, asked to have a king, which they just borrowed from Denmark, who said, I won't be your king unless your people want. So they had this vote. Do you want to have a monarchy? Yes. Okay. Well, have another vote. Make sure they want me. They said yes. He goes over there. Norway also, supposedly, their entire economy is just built on oil that England found. The facts that you learn from a German dude who's your tour guide going to and from Flom. Anyway, back to Sweden. Sweden in the Vasa Museum. So this ship that had been commissioned by the king years before 1628, as they're warring with, what is now Poland and different parts. I want to say Yugoslavia at the time. King says, I want this giant ship. I want it to be a remembrance of me. And I want it to have a double decker as far as our cannon ports, our gun ports. So we stick them at the side of the boat. It's not just one level of cannons. We want two. Well, they build this giant ship that is way too long and narrow and sails out in this particular day. Well, he's fighting battles elsewhere. There's a stiff wind from one side that tips the ship over because it's top heavy. Because this was not how you should build ships, but no one wanted to tell the king, hey, this was a bad idea because he's the freaking king. And so it sinks before it leaves the harbor. Now, the ship is not there. The museum is not there because it's the most embarrassing, initial Odyssey quest, I'm trying to think of the word, your first maiden voyage of any ship ever taken. It's that when it sunk into the harbor and was discovered 350 years later, it was basically perfectly preserved. So they pulled the ship up, threw it in the museum, dusted everything off, replaced a couple of things. It's incredibly ornate on the outside because every king is vain, and it's spectacular. So very, very cool to see up close at the Vasa Museum, VASA, and otherwise called it a night at a hybrid, it was like Japanese with some Nordic influences restaurant right next door. Shout out to Taki in the Hobo Hotel. Great trip. So that was way longer than I ever thought I would go on my Patriots podcast about my travels. I hope you enjoyed some part of that story. There are definitely things that I forgot, but we got to go. I will be back next week talking minicamp. I will only be at, however, the Monday practice because I am flying to Dallas to lead our coverage for the Herald of the Celtics, as we still do not have a full-time Celtics beat writer. Not upset about going to the finals. Just wish we, had a little bit more manpower. But anyway, I will talk about that on Monday. We will get more about what happened later in the week about the rest of minicamp. We might actually just wait till the end of the week, but we'll see. Anyway, see you next week. Minicamp talk. And then that's it. It's like the off-season. It's really just like 4 weeks. Then training camp's here. I can't wait. See you guys.